Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The Perfect Coincidence. When Maggie first found the old postcard at the bottom of her grandmother's drawer, she thought nothing of it. It was a typical postcard, nothing spectacular. The image on the front was of a sunny beach with the words, "Greetings from Seabrook," printed in bold letters above a view of the ocean. But the back was what made Maggie freeze. Written in smudged ink, in a neat, looping script, were just 2 lines. "I'll be there at 5 p.m. Don't forget the blue umbrella. It'll be our sign." There was no date, no name, just a message. Maggie wasn't sure why, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She turned the postcard over in her hand. Her grandmother, Clara, had passed away last year, and the postcard was among some of the things Maggie was sorting through as she went through her grandmother's things. She had never seen this postcard before. Clara had never mentioned Seabrook. There were no family vacations to the beach, no secret lovers from some faraway town. There were no blue umbrellas. But the thing that unsettled Maggie the most was how familiar the writing looked. The loops, the curls, they looked exactly like her handwriting. Maggie shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. It was ridiculous. It was just a coincidence. She had to be imagining things. But still, the words echoed in her mind as she tucked the postcard into her pocket. Over the next few days, Maggie couldn't stop thinking about it. Why had her grandmother kept it? Why hadn't she ever mentioned Seabrook or the blue umbrella? Maggie, for reasons she didn't understand, decided to look into it. The next weekend, she packed her things and headed out to Seabrook. It wasn't far, just a few hours' drive. She didn't know why, but something told her she needed to see it for herself. Seabrook was a little town with the kind of charm that felt a little too quaint, a little too perfect to be real. As Maggie drove through the small streets, she started to feel like she was in a movie. The cobblestone paths, the little cafes with flower boxes in the windows, the sea breeze, it all felt so familiar. She found a small inn to stay in, an old white house with a wraparound porch. The lady at the front desk greeted her with a warm smile, as if she had been expecting her. "First time in Seabrook?" she asked. Maggie nodded. "Yes, just for the weekend. You'll love it here," the lady said. "The best spot is down by the beach. If you're looking for something to do, The pier's just a short walk. It's beautiful at sunset. Maggie smiled politely, but she wasn't here for the tourist attractions. She was here for something else. That evening, as the sun began to set, Maggie walked down toward the beach. The breeze was cool on her face, and the sand felt soft beneath her feet. She had no idea where she was going, but somehow she felt like the postcard was leading her, like she was following an invisible trail her grandmother had left behind, even though Clara had never told her to come. She walked along the shore, the sound of the waves crashing in the distance. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A small blue umbrella, positioned right by the water, almost as if it had been waiting for her. Maggie stopped in her tracks. Her heart raced as she stared at the umbrella. It was a little worn, the fabric faded, but it was unmistakably blue, exactly like the one in the postcard. She approached slowly. There was no one else around, just the umbrella, the sound of the waves, and a growing sense of anticipation. As she reached the umbrella, she saw a bench nearby, old and weathered, its paint chipped from years of saltwater exposure. But what caught her eye next was the piece of paper resting on the bench. It was folded neatly, like a letter with a small, familiar scrawl on the front. Maggie, open me. Her hand trembled as she unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter, though. It was another postcard, identical to the one she had found in her grandmother's drawer. The same beach, the same seabrook at the top. But this time, the words were different. I'm here, just like I promised. Meet me where the ocean touches the sand. The blue umbrella will be your sign. I'm waiting. Maggie's heart skipped. This can't be happening, she thought, almost breathlessly. She glanced around, but the beach was empty. No one was here. No one had been here, and yet, somehow, she felt drawn to the spot, like it was a place where time and reality blurred. Clara? She whispered, almost as if speaking the name aloud would make something happen. But there was no answer, no sign of anyone nearby. She sat down on the bench, the postcard in her lap. The sun was almost fully set now, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. Then, a figure appeared at the edge of the beach. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. The figure was too far away to make out clearly, but something about the silhouette seemed so familiar. The way they moved, graceful and sure-footed, as if they had walked this very spot 1,000 times. Maggie stood, unable to keep herself seated. She took a few tentative steps toward the figure, her eyes squinting, trying to make sense of the shadow. The person grew clearer as they approached, and Maggie's pulse raced in her ears. It was her grandmother, Clara, standing before her, looking younger than Maggie had ever remembered. Her skin was free of the wrinkles it had when she'd passed. Her hair, though graying when she died, was now thick and dark, cascading down her shoulders. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile that made Maggie's heart ache. "Grandma?" Maggie whispered, her voice barely audible. Clara nodded, her smile deepening. "I knew you'd find me, Maggie." "Find you?" Maggie felt tears well up in her eyes. "But how? How are you here?" Clara reached out, her hand brushing Maggie's cheek. "It's not as complicated as it seems. I needed to bring you back here. Back home." Maggie shook her head in disbelief. "But the postcards, they were from you?" "Not exactly," Clara said softly. "The message was always for you. But it wasn't time for you to understand until now. You were always meant to be here, Maggie. Right where the ocean meets the sand." Maggie's heart pounded, her thoughts spinning. But why the blue umbrella? Why Seabrook? Clara's eyes softened, and she gave a small, bittersweet laugh. The umbrella was just a symbol, your sign. And as for Seabrook, my dear, well, all I can say is that this is your home now. The wind picked up slightly, the ocean whispering as the world around them seemed to shift again. Like a dream slowly fading, Maggie opened her mouth to ask more, but the words caught in her throat. Clara's figure started to dissolve, becoming less distinct, as if the very air was pulling her back into some distant place. "Wait!" Maggie called, but her grandmother's figure was already gone, leaving nothing behind but the blue umbrella and the sound of the waves. Maggie stood there, her hands trembling, her heart racing. The perfect coincidence, too good to be true, had just happened. The chase on the rails, a pre-World War I. Calm masked the coming global upheaval. Amidst this backdrop, a train chugged steadily through the English countryside, its destination, Dover. Aboard the 1914 vessel, a passenger captivated many. The air was thick with a mix of excitement and unease as the train thundered down the tracks, its rhythmic chugging creating a comforting backdrop to the day's unfolding drama. Outside, the view was a mosaic of vibrant green meadows and charming hamlets, smelling fresh earth wafting through the windows, contrasting with arguing the imminent war. Inside the train carriage, the passenger in question sat quietly, their demeanor calm, yet enigmatic. Dressed in a sharp suit and hat, they exuded an air of mystery that drew curious glances from their fellow travelers. The train's rhythmic motion seemed to lull the other passengers into a sense of security. But an aura of intrigue surrounded this particular individual. The landscape outside the window shifted from a bustling cityscape to serene countryside. The enigmatic passenger remained a captivating enigma. Who was this mysterious figure? And what secrets did they carry with them on this fateful journey to Dover? The answers lay shrouded in the depths of their enigmatic presence, waiting to be unraveled by the curious minds on board. As the train neared its destination, the tension on board seemed to heighten, mirroring the growing unease gripping the world at large. Little did the passengers know the events set in motion by this mysterious traveler would soon intersect with the tumult of war, forever altering the course of history. Among the passengers was Mata Hari, the enigmatic Dutch dancer and courtesan who had captivated and charmed the elite of Europe. But her allure had drawn suspicion, and the British intelligence service had dispatched one of their finest, a seasoned spy named Jonathan Hawke, to shadow her every move. As the train pulled away from Victoria Station, Jonathan positioned himself discreetly in the adjoining compartment. His eyes never left the door to Mata Hari's cabin. Dressed in an inconspicuous dark suit, he blended seamlessly with the other travelers, his demeanor calm, but his senses alert. The rhythmic clattering of the train wheels provided a steady soundtrack to the journey. Jonathan's thoughts were as relentless as the locomotive's progress. He knew Mata Hari was dangerous. Her charm and beauty merely veils for her cunning and guile. The British had reason to believe she was ferrying secrets to the enemy, and Jonathan's mission was simple: follow her, gather evidence, and ensure she did not slip through their fingers. In her compartment, Mata Hari appeared unperturbed, gazing out at the passing landscapes with an air of nonchalance. Her elegant attire, a blend of exoticism and European sophistication, further enhanced her mystique. Her eyes, however, betrayed a sharpness, a readiness for the unexpected. As the train approached the coastal town of Dover, Jonathan's instincts heightened. He knew that if Mata Hari were to escape, it would be through the port, where she could easily vanish across the channel to France. He reviewed his plan, every move calculated to counter any strategy she might employ. The train's whistle announced their arrival at Dover. Passengers gathered their belongings, anticipation mingling with the salty sea air. Jonathan observed Mata Hari, who seemed in no rush. Her leisurely demeanor was unnerving, but Jonathan knew better than to underestimate her. At the station, the hustle and bustle provided ample cover for both pursuers and pursued. Jonathan kept a safe distance, blending with the crowd. Mata Hari moved with purpose, her steps leading her inevitably towards the ferry docks. As the crowd surged forward, Jonathan deftly maneuvered through the throng, maintaining his vigil on Mata Hari. His heart pounded, the adrenaline of the chase sharpening his senses. He saw her exchange a quick glance with a man in a gray overcoat, a signal too subtle for most eyes, but not for Jonathan's trained observation. Mata Hari quickened her pace, gliding through the bustling station with the grace of a dancer. Jonathan matched her stride for stride, his focus unwavering. He noticed the man in the gray overcoat shadowing her, and it became clear. Jonathan was not the only one on her trail. The docks were a maze of activity, with ferries preparing for departure and travelers hurrying to embark. Matahari headed towards a smaller vessel, its destination marked as Calais. Jonathan felt the tension coil within him. He had to act swiftly to prevent her escape. Just as Matahari reached the gangway, Jonathan closed the gap, his hand inching towards his concealed firearm. But before he could make his move, the man in the gray overcoat stepped forward, blocking Jonathan's path. Their eyes locked, a silent recognition passing between the two agents of their deadly game. In a flash, the man drew a weapon, and something forced Jonathan to dive for cover. The crack of gunfire split the air, sending panic through the crowd. With the sight of her bodyguard lying dead with a bullet in the middle of his forehead, Matahari, seizing the moment of chaos, darted up the gangway and onto the ferry. Jonathan scrambled to his feet, his gaze fixed on the retreating figure of the dancer, now almost obscured by the fleeing passengers. Desperate, Jonathan sprinted towards the ferry, but it was too late. The vessel pulled away from the dock, the gap between the ship and the quay widening with every second. He watched as Matahari stood at the railing, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. The sound of the ship's horn echoed through the harbor, signaling its departure. Jonathan's heart sank as he realized he had missed his chance to reach Matahari. The image of her standing there, so close yet out of reach, haunted him as the ferry disappeared into the horizon. Despair washed over him as he stood alone on the empty dock, the cold wind cutting through his coat and sending shivers down his spine. The sound of seagulls echoed in the distance, a stark reminder of the solitude that enveloped him. His heart ached with the weight of uncertainty, wondering if this missed connection would be his biggest regret. The memories of their last meeting played like a broken record in his mind, each moment tinged with longing and a sense of unfinished business as he gazed out at the vast expanse of water. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had slipped through his fingers, leaving him adrift in a sea of what-ifs and maybes. The setting sun cast a golden hue over the horizon, painting a bittersweet picture of what could have been. The black of 3 a.m. My favorite time of the day is 3 a.m. Why, you might ask? Well, the answer is quite simple, but the answer is quite complicated. You'll understand in time. All we have is time, especially at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. is for the people, a heaven and a hell that works hand in hand. Most are sleeping by 3 a.m., the normal practice. That's not the true 3 a.m., though, not in the slightest. 3 a.m. is uneasy breathing as you wake from a nightmare, alert and ready for danger, before you realize it cannot cross the plains into reality. It existed, but the silence that 3 a.m. offers you reminds you it is no longer real. It was real, but it's gone. Maybe it'll be back, but not now. Not at 3 a.m. However, for some, it's far too real, far too close, and it's right there. 3 a.m. is there to support them, though, the black filled with cartouillant from the moon. It makes the lights we use seem so bright, makes every step seem too loud. Yet, it is perfect. 3 a.m. is technology-lit rooms. It's for the gamer who has yet to quit their endeavors, with softly pressed keys and hushed voices. It's for those who the 3 a.m. favors, letting the time wash by as they hope for sleep, reprieve, something. It rarely comes. They hate the 3 a.m. 3 a.m. is for bright white lights of shops that seem amiss in the black of night. The people inside always vary, but not all of them want to be there. Not all of them like that side of 3 a.m. It's filled with soft chatter, or more often, no chatter. A silence that booms, that ticks on by. The people all have reasons for being there. Some can't sleep as a duty to their family, to travel within the black of night, to lessen their family's load. Some can't sleep because of what sleeping means for them, the horror it brings along again and again. Then there are those that brave the 3 a.m. for something go insignificant as money. The cashier who experiences the full blunt of how slow 3 a.m. can be. The man with a gun, he's the most desperate, but he knows how bad the 3 a.m. can get. The officers, tired, exhausted, but they have a job to do. 3 a.m. is terrifying. It's black, black, black. It's lonely. It's scary. There are things that happen at 3 a.m. in back alleys and bar bathrooms. 3 a.m. teaches you just how horrible the world is, how unmerciful it is. I think 3 a.m. depends on the people. It's made for the people. 3 a.m. is the time where no one judges, where people can be their truest selves, for best or for worse. 3 a.m. is like the sky, the night sky. It's black, black, black. That is it. It's darkness and darkness, and it swallows up everything. 3 a.m. is like the sky, bright and full of stars, all so far away. The sky is darkness, 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 but it allows us to see, to truly see what surrounds us. It shows us the stars so far away, burning and burning away, until you realize that we can only see what the stars once were. A bright light before it burns out. 3 a.m. is for loss, for quiet sobs and silent wailing. It's for time to stop, to let reality hit you head on. 3 a.m. is for selfish, hateful crying over losses you never used to think you had to prepare for. 3 a.m. is for pain, for bubbly and outgoing people to let their feelings take control, to lose the mask they present the world. It's a time for red to meet bathroom tiles. It's a time for young people to fly. It's time for pain. 3 a.m. is pain, and it doesn't know anything else. 3 a.m. is for love, for heart-to-heart chats on top of bridges, or whispered phone calls under blankets. 3 a.m. is for wrapping wounds you shouldn't have made, but knowing they will worry your friend, so hiding them is a priority. 3 a.m. is for promises. A text that says you'll love them forever. A voice message saying it's not their fault, never their fault. Sometimes it's promising them unconditional love, and sometimes it's promising them more time. 3 a.m. is mysterious like that, despite its flaws. I love 3 a.m. I recognize it for what it is. It's a time to rest, to scream, to cry, to mourn. But it's also a time to talk, to connect, to know you aren't alone. 3 a.m. is peaceful. 3 a.m. is awful. It gives, but then it takes. 3 a.m. is where I met you for the first time. On the very bridge I wouldn't leave, I met you. We spoke of 3 a.m. together under the moonlight. We spoke of 3 p.m. as well. 3 p.m. caused your 3 a.m. after all. 3 p.m. was something that took a long time to come for you. But once it was there, you would savor it, even if only for a moment. You spent your days wishing for 3 p.m. Because if 3 a.m. was for life to pass, 3 p.m. was for school to pass. Then you spoke of such unfairnesses that were never righted once 3 p.m. came for you. The aftermath of 3 p.m. We both knew that 3 a.m. was your only reprieve of the day. And yet you decided that 3 a.m. was worth dealing with what surrounded 3 p.m. It wasn't my first 3 a.m., but it was yours. So we talked and talked and talked. I managed to stop your plans. Each night you came, and each night I stopped you. Each night I could stop you. Your 3 p.m. never got any better. I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. Your 3 a.m.s got so regular. We got so regular. Then we got better. Or did we? Was I just imagining that? I saw you smile more. soft, and so vulnerable. You gave me your soul, whispered every secret. And yet, you were my sister, my little baby sister. Not by blood, not by name, but by 3 a.m. whispers. You were blood in ways that mattered. Shared blood-splattering pavements and matching bruises from after our 3 p.m. You were my 3 a.m. You made my 3 p.m. bearable, and I returned the favor as much as I could. Little sister, you were so little. We were far too young. I broke our promise. First, it was selfish, foolish, and absolutely monstrous of me. You weren't there. You didn't need our 3 a.m. I slipped. I'm sorry. So sorry. I knew there would be consequences. When you came to our spot on the abandoned bridge, the next 3 a.m., oh, I tried to hug you, tight as you wailed, pulling you into a cold embrace. It was no use, though, no matter how tight I held you, no matter how much I loved you. I failed you, my dear little sister. You were the only person to find my body, and I, yours. The night the engines died. The passengers of Flight 227 had just completed their meal. The cabin buzzed quietly with the clinking of silverware, an intermittent laugh, and the faint sound of rustling newspapers. Ordinary, routine sounds that masked behind the fragile facade of safety the horror that loomed just beyond. A stewardess laughed at a joke told by a passenger. A man in first class swirled his wine, enjoying the final sip. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, its static sibilant as a snake wrapping its way around the unwitting passengers. Then the voice, calm, deliberate, but with an unnatural solemnity, as if the captain was reading his own obituary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. A moment of silence, just enough time for apprehension to germinate. I need to inform you of an issue. The words hung in the air, like an executioner's blade, poised to drop. The atmosphere changed instantly, as though an unseen presence had blown a chilly breath over the cabin, permeating every crack and crevice, wrapping around each traveler like invisible fingers clenching into a fist. Talk stalled, laughter died, to be succeeded by tense silence, as though the whole aircraft had sucked in its communal breath. The pilot went on, his voice strained with shame, but shaking under the burden of the nightmare he had created. In my hurry to leave Charles de Gaulle Airport, I failed to adequately monitor our fuel levels. A long, ragged pause ripped through the intercom, as though he was fighting to get out the words. I am ashamed to say this. I know I have let you all down. A hollow, uncomfortable silence fell over the cabin, choking the air like an invisible hand squeezing against each chest. The pilot paused to catch his breath, before continuing, his voice cracking under the strain. Since we have been flying for a long time, our destination could be beyond our reach, since we may lack sufficient fuel to get there. The finality of his confession hit the passengers like a physical blow, drawing the air out of the cabin as though the aircraft itself had inhaled a gasp of horror. Some cried out loud. Others were paralyzed, their hands clenching armrests so hard that their knuckles whitened, as though through sheer force of will they could halt the unstoppable. A man grasped at his chest, his breathing shallow and fast, the first spasms of fear gripping his heart. The aircraft, once a sanctuary of order and technology, was now a prison of uncertainty. A metal coffin cutting through the emptiness at 500 miles an hour. Every flashing light, every jolt of turbulence seemed to foretell disaster. The whispers of fear were growing louder, building into a jarring buzz of terror. There were no strangers then, just the doomed, held together by the unspoken grasp of fear as they spoored toward some unknown destiny. And then another violent and convulsive shudder that ripped through the aircraft as if it had been seized in a death grip by an invisible hand. One of the engines coughed, sputtered, and died. The whole plane shuddered as if it had been hit by an invisible blow. A jolting crash of bone that threw passengers from their seats and sent loose objects flying through the cabin. The sickening lurch sent drinks crashing, trays falling to the floor, and overhead lockers bursting open, their contents spilling into the aisle. Gasps turned to screams as the cabin tilted, the aircraft going into an unnatural descent. The aircraft had already started to descend to New York, but now it was plummeting, no longer descending in a controlled manner, but spiraling out of control. The cabin lights flickered madly, casting crazed shadows on faces paralyzed with terror. The aircraft lurched violently, its damaged fuselage objecting to the stress. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like ghostly apparitions, dangling inertly amidst the chaos. The cabin erupted into pandemonium. Screams of abject terror, cries for assistance, the raspy howls of those who recognized the inevitable. The night sky outside, once an endless expanse of stillness and silence, now pressed in like the walls of a closing tomb. The vastness had turned suffocating, a cosmic void ready to consume them. Below, the earth was no longer a distant haze, but a giant, looming thing, reaching out to snatch them with an appetite that threatened to consume them. City lights unfurled like streaks of flame, oblivious to the souls above, speeding towards their fate. The altimeter ticked down at a remorseless pace. The aircraft was still too far from New York City. its decreasing altitude a grim countdown without reprieve. There were no longer any alternative airports, no deviations, just the relentless descent and the understanding that hope was running through their fingers like sand in a gale. The cockpit was a maelstrom of confusion. Alarms screaming, warning lights flashing like a dying pulse. The aircraft strained against gravity, shuddering so violently the control panels creaked. The first officer's white-knuckled fists held tight to the yoke, his forehead beaded with sweat. His voice, strained and almost lost in the din of automated warnings, sliced through the chaos. The second engine coughed, sputtered, and with a final agonizing splutter, died in silence. A jolting stillness filled the cockpit, broken only by the otherworldly shriek of wind whistling past the fuselage. It was the kind of stillness that felt unnatural, deafening in its absence of power. A stillness that presaged catastrophe. The aircraft, a marvel of controlled engineering, was now reduced to a huge metal husk, a crippled glider flying through the darkness. The control panels blacked out, their frantic warnings muted, as if even the plane itself had given up. The first officer's breath caught, his fists still gripped on the dead yoke, as if sheer willpower could urge power back into the engines. His eyes bulged wide, darting to the altimeter, its numbers free-falling with heart-stopping speed. The first officer's knuckles turned white on the throttle. We're dead stick. No thrust. The captain's mind reeled. We can glide this in. His voice, which he tried to keep steady, trembled. He was not sure. It seemed to take forever for the ram air turbine to deploy, its little turbine opening up into the howling wind like a desperate last gasp prayer to the emptiness. Inside the cabin, the flight attendants strode down the aisles with stiff formality, their faces drawn but determined. Their voices, strained as they were, carried the authority of rehearsed command. "Brace for impact, please," one of them screamed, her voice hardly cutting through the noise. A few passengers complied at once, throwing themselves forward, arms clasped around their heads. Others were paralyzed, their brains locked in denial, unable to comprehend the unimaginable. One man struggled with his seatbelt, shaking so hard he couldn't locate the buckle. A woman clutched the armrest so hard her fingernails cracked on the plastic. The emergency lights strobed feebly, casting eerie shadows that twitched on faces contorted in terror. People shrieked, a loud, grating cacophony of terror. Some embraced their loved ones. Others slapped hands over their faces, screams muffled by the deafening quiet of the plummeting plane. A flight attendant, holding onto the back of a seat for balance, mouthed frantic reassurances no one heard. The aircraft vibrated heavily, the fuselage complaining in protest to the strain of its powerless plummeting. Unsecured items flew around the cabin, bouncing off chairs and people. Each passing second seemed impossibly long, as if the fabric of time itself had rent asunder under the threat of disaster. The captain gritted his teeth, his hands trembling over the controls. The glide of the plane was erratic, its path a hardly controlled plunge into the emptiness. The cockpit echoed with alarms, relentless, screaming their warnings in a cruel mockery of hope. Smoke from the failing systems wreathed through the dim light, the acrid scent of burning circuits searing his lungs, and then, out of the spinning darkness, out of the turmoil, he saw it, a faint, glimmering glow in the distance, cutting through the blackness like a sliver of salvation. New York City, runway lights, a fragile lifeline quivering in the fog, teasingly distant. But could they reach it? Or was it an illusion, a mirage in the final few seconds before extinction? The first officer's breath caught, his heart racing in his throat, as his eyes locked onto the gleaming light ahead. "We might make it, after all," he whispered, his voice trembling with a faint, desperate hope, as though saying the words aloud could make it so. But beneath his words was the unspoken fear, the knowledge that they were still at the mercy of gravity, the wind, and fate itself. But they hadn't reached there yet. The trees rose like shattered black shapes, their gnarled branches reaching out greedily toward the plane, as if to pull it down into nothingness. He had seconds. His grasp of the yoke was vice-like, his knuckles white under the faint glow of the flickering gauges. The plane bucked in an irregular motion that was wild, turbulence and gravity resisting every movement. His heart throbbed in his head, but his mind was fixed in steel-sharp concentration. The first officer took a deep breath. Hold it just a little longer. The branches on top of the trees were closing in. The runway lights continued to flicker ahead, teasingly near, yet impossibly distant. They were on the brink of salvation or doom. One last risk, one last wild maneuver. With a violent tug on the controls, he went for the gap. The tops of the trees scraped the underside of the plane, ripping at the undercarriage. The sound of metal on wood screamed through the cabin, and then a deafening, bone-crushing bang. A merciless cacophony of screaming metal and bursting steel, as if the heavens themselves had fallen. The force of impact vibrated through the fuselage, seats ripped from their mounts, bodies tossed around like dolls, flames licked along the broken edges of the aircraft, illuminating the darkness in an otherworldly, flickering glow. A choking cloud of smoke rolled through the wreckage, its acrid grip tightening around every strangling breath of air. The ground trembled with aftershocks, debris still creaking and groaning in the burning wreckage. Then, silence. A fragile, unnatural silence, shattered only by the crackles of fire and the rough, strained breathing of those who remained alive. There were cries from the rubble, some in the distance, some close, bare with pain and shock. The reek of smoldering petrol clung to the air, a bitter reminder of how close they had come to complete destruction. And when the smoke finally cleared, the twisted remains of the plane lay stretched out like a broken, tortured thing, its bare skeleton scarcely discernible as the great ship that it once was. And yet, despite all the odds, everyone was alive, poised between the salvation and oblivion, balanced on the brink of an impossible second chance. The captain, bruised and inexplicably alive, gaped as he released his harness, his sweat-soaked fingers shaking with aftershock. His ribs throbbed with searing pain, every breath a burning reminder of the savagery they'd just survived. He hauled himself up, vision fading, the metallic flavor of blood in his mouth. The debris lay before him like the scene of a nightmare. Flames licking across scorched metal. The bitter taste of fuel and smoke choking the air. Remote, tortured screams resounded in his mind, together with the ringing that had not stopped since impact. His head reeled, replaying every mistake, every warning he had ignored. The sign of his failure weighed upon him, more oppressive than the wreckage that enclosed him. He had made a mistake that should have killed everyone. Colorless Heart. Set your story in a world that has lost all color. Colorless Heart by Lucy Apadu. Marie roused from sleep in the double bed inside the Paris Hilton Hotel. She sank into the comfort of the silky sheets and the fresh fabric smell. A smile splashed across her face, unable to open her eyes just yet. Freedom at last. Just her. No one else. No jumping on eggshells. Not being caught off guard. No secrets. No lies. Just Marie. No other soul in this room. Away from him. But it wasn't only about liberation. It was about protection. Keeping her loved ones safe. She had to keep them alive. And this was the only way. Freedom for herself, but separation from her loved ones. But that one person foremost in her brain. Salvatore. Marie had recently attended a gun range and learned how to fire a gun, just in case. She never knew when she might need to use it. It was about protection. The alarm on her mobile phone jerked her fully awake. A yawn filtered through as she slowly opened her eyes and spotted her phone on the dull black bedside table that had been brown yesterday. The white cushions that had been hues of purple the black curtains that had been taupe, the ash-black carpet beneath the bed that had been gray, and the black sky through a gap in the window curtain that had been blue. No more blue skies, no more shades other than black and white. The world had lost its color. Marie's breath quickened as her heart palpitated. She rose from bed and rubbed her eyes hard. It had to be her eyes. Had she suddenly become colorblind? Where were all the bright, vibrant colors when it was what she needed? She shut, then opened her eyes, but nothing changed. Her world was drab, colorless, soulless. Her shoulders slumped over. Her head bowed. A slow chill ran up and down her spine. Curiosity piqued. Her skin reddened and turned hot. She had no choice but to be here in this colorless world. What had happened overnight to turn her entire world into a shroud of darkness with only black and white in its midst? Marie wandered outside the hotel, lost in a world where she knew no one. She had left Melbourne to make a fresh start in Paris, so nobody would find her. So he couldn't find her. She couldn't believe having woken up in a with shades of gray and black blocking her view of natural color, light, and even shades of gray. A bench with a view of the River Seine looked inviting as she made her way over, put her bag down, and stared at the calm ripples with a view of the majestic Eiffel Tower. Sailing boats anchored in the water, bunched up trees, and riders swinging their arms inside canoes. The wind scraped her face in the winter. Nothing but black and white. Marie flashed back to her former life, back home where she worked as an interior designer, married to a man she didn't love, and friends who would most likely understand her escape. Yesterday, her world was dark, but today, after she awoke, it became darker, grittier, and scarier. Did this lack of color mean something? Could she no longer design with color to refresh old homes or design new ones if she wanted to start over in France? She had not rung anyone except her best friend Helena about her sudden escape for their own protection. With a call from a burner phone, she announced her safe arrival. "Do you have color? Or has the world changed?" Helena replied. "What are you talking about? The things in the world. They're in black and white, Helena. I woke up this morning and nothing was in color. No blues, browns, pinks, purple, yellows, or any color. All gone. Is Melbourne the same? Don't be silly, Marie. We still have color. Have you become colorblind? Had your eyes checked? You couldn't have become colorblind in an instant. Go get them tested. Oh, and please stay safe. I don't know when I'll call you next. You know how he is. He could be tracking this conversation even if it's on a burner phone. I love you, Marie, and I'm glad you're safe now. One day, we'll be together again." Marie fought back tears after ending the call. She would miss her loved ones, but she still didn't get what was going on. Was she the crazy one? Or did only Paris lose its color? With a sigh, Marie rose and made her way back to the hotel, knowing she'd have to find herself permanent residence. As she crossed the wide road, a towering man brushed her shoulder. "Oh, sorry." He locked eyes with her and walked ahead of her on the other side of the road. His broad shoulders and black eyes made her shudder, stopping in his tracks. "I have a message to give you." She angled her head. "Who are you?" "Here, take this," he said. She retrieved the note. He watched her. Who the hell was this guy? And why was he making her nervous? "Who are you?" "I'm just the messenger, lady. Read the note." "Who sent you?" He inched his way closer. Benny did. "Now read the note." "No. Not again." He found her. Would this bastard ever leave her alone? With a shuddering breath, she unfolded the note, her hands shaking and the back of her neck sweating. Bits of her skin prickled. What was this? She had to be dreaming. As she read the note, her vision blurred, as if the words weren't real. The threat wasn't real. "Meet me in front of the Louvre tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp, or someone you love dies." The same old threats again. How did he find me? The man bared his crooked teeth with a smile. He swaggered off into the distance. It wasn't over. It never would be. The next morning, Marie paced her steps towards the Louvre, a queue that was a mile long. She wondered if anyone would ever reach the entrance to the museum. The glass panels of the building distracted her from the enemy she was about to meet. Each step drew her closer to the devil. When would it end? Her breath hitched as she stepped on uneven ground, razor-sharp pain cutting into her lower back as she fought the gust of frozen wind. She had to free herself. But how? He would always find her, threaten her, obsess over her, and abuse her. She'd been abused for 3 torturous years. Storm clouds brewed when Marie drew closer to the swarms of people. It was almost 9 o'clock, and passers-by stared at her as if she as an alien. Was it obvious she was heading towards her death chamber, to her dreaded foe? A cold caress at the back of her neck made her freeze in her spot. She turned. It was him. Benny. In all his wealthy glamour, the bastard wore a black tie, black buttoned-up suit jacket over a black cashmere jumper with black pleated pants over Italian leather shoes. He smelled rich. "Follow me," he said, as he prodded her towards an unknown destination. They walked in silence as his intermittent glares unnerved her. The squeeze of his arm draped through hers, leaving bruises. But she said nothing. His pinch at the back of her neck made her flinch, but she said nothing. The push and pull of her hair strands made her want to cry out, but she didn't. Hidden pain to display her fake strength. When finally, she sat down outside the cafe with its outdoor setting, he ordered hot drinks and croissants. No one does what you did and gets away with it. She swallowed, her lip trembling as she stared past him. Please don't hurt him, he chuckled and threw his head back, his stained white teeth prominent. Flicking a cigarette over an ashtray, he tilted his head. You're lucky I love you, Marie. If I didn't love you, you'd be dead by now. But you ever try something like this again, and I won't hesitate to slash your throat, feed your decrepit body to the fish in the Seine River. Got that? She nodded, a black spot clouding her vision. Puffs of smoke floated towards her and made her cough. Not that he cared. He was a narcissist. He retrieved his phone. Watch this. No, I mean business, Marie. I don't blow damn smoke up my arse. She gripped the phone and saw him, tied up to a chair, gagged, beaten, tortured. Two black eyes, bruising across his cheek, haggard, frail, head hanging down low, as if giving up. No, don't give up, my love. Never give up. A gasp of air grounded her. Rattling teeth must have made her look scared in front of him. Is he all right? He scoffed. That depends on you. You put 1 foot wrong. Leave me again, and he dies. Only when we're safely back home, he'll be released. The waiter returned with the croissants and hot coffees. Sorry about the croissants. They're a little overcooked, but these are more their natural yellow. Marie winced. But those croissants are black, not yellow. He waved a hand. Don't mind her. She's the constant joker. But no worries. We'll have them as they are. The waiter nodded. Black, you say? Benny glared. Leave us. The waiter walked off with a curious gaze. He turned to her. What is wrong with you? Can't you see the color of the food? How could he not see what she was seeing? What was wrong with her? No, everything is black and white. I don't see color anymore. He laughed. Are you telling me you don't? You see the brown coffees, the blue ashtray, the beige tablecloth, my red tie, my dashing blue eyes. Her heart missed a beat as she gritted her teeth. No, I lost sight of color this morning. I woke up like this. Everything is black and white. Interesting, he said. Marie looked past him and spotted the man she'd seen earlier. The one who had given her the note. He was standing by a lamppost, sculling a bottle of beer. Why was he around? He must have been Benny's bodyguard, in case she made a run for it. Marie and Benny stepped inside her hotel room. He pushed her towards the wardrobe. "Start packing. Our flight leaves in a few hours." "Okay then." She pushed aside her floating tears and steeled herself by pulling out her suitcase from underneath the bed, unzipping it. As if in a surreal world, she pulled clothing off hangers and threw them into the suitcase. She was going back to her prison, away from the love of her life. If only she had been stronger a few years ago, when he had framed her ex-boyfriend, Salvatore, for murder, just so he could be free from prison. She was forced to marry him. Marriage to Benny in exchange for Salvatore's freedom. She had never explained why she'd broken up with him. Had to convince Salvatore she no longer loved him. It had cut her insides, but she had to keep him safe. Salvatore had not given up on her and found ways for them to meet secretly. But Benny always found out about their secret rendezvous. He had put plans in place, made the worst things happen. Benny involved in Salvatore crashing his car, ruining his reputation in business, injuring his friend with a beating by his henchmen, and almost killing him at least twice. Now Salvatore was threatened with death. What more could the creep do? "I'm having a shower," he said. She sat on the bed. How could she go back with him? But she had no choice when Salvatore would die if she didn't. Benny's phone lay on the bedside table. Curious, she picked it up and found his recording. Salvatore was still tied to the chair, still tortured and broken. But wait, something was weird about this video. The actions were the same. His movements repeated in a cycle, as if it was on a loop. This wasn't her true love life. This was a fake video. It had to be. Could Salvatore have arranged this? Outsmarted Benny again? She smiled to herself. Now she had a chance to do something. Fight him. Hurt him. But no, she wasn't a violent person and had morals. Nothing like Benny. What could she do? Run away again? But Benny might pursue Salvatore and never stop. He would never stop finding her until his own death. She knew that. So what could she do? She could never reason with a crazy person. A knock on the door made her jolt in her spot. It could be anyone. Her heart racing, she slowly opened the door and flinched when the man from earlier pushed past her. "Where's Benny? What are you doing here?" the man whispered in her ear. "Listen, Salvatore will set you free. Get out of here." She swallowed, her vision blurring. What? The back of her neck sweated as one ear listened in on Benny in the shower. "No time to talk. Leave. Now. We'll take care of this." She was right. It was a fake recording. He'd escaped. Where is he? The man swung the gun in his hand, scanning past her. "He's closer than you think. Go now." Her heart soared, and a spot of color flashed in her vision. but only fleetingly. It turned black and white again. What in hell is going on here? Benny grasped something from his back pocket. Why are you here? The man shrugged until reaching his side pocket and shooting towards Benny, who shifted to the side, the bullet grazing his cheek. But Benny pulled out his own gun and took aim. The gun hit the man square in the chest. He fell back against the door with a thud. Marie quaked. It was over. No love, no freedom. You will never leave me. Never, Marie. Get that. Nobody will ever take you away from me. Grab your things. Hurry up. He shifted the strange man's body to the bathroom, blood pouring out of him like a tap. When he returned, Benny shoved her aside and flung the remainder of her clothes into the suitcase. Now zip it up and let's leave pronto. He sat on the sofa and scrolled through his phone. A call to one of his stupid thugs. Goosebumps swarmed like insects over her arms as a dull ache at the back of her neck made her queasy. This had to stop, slowly zipping up the baggage. A shuffling sound underneath the bed made her think she was hearing things. But no. She spotted a shoe protruding from the corner as someone glided further to the edge near the bedside table. Salvatore appeared and placed a finger across his lips, hefting a gun. She moved towards Benny, pulled the suitcase off the bed, and retrieved her bag. I'm ready. Salvatore flung himself in the open and approached Benny with an aim of his gun. Put your hands up. Now. Benny flinched. You have a death wish, don't you? You might have got away from my men, but you'll never win this war. I will fight you to the death, Benny. I don't care if I die, so long as Marie goes free. Free from your dungeon. Free from your psychopathic world. You loser. He faced Marie. Go now. I'll take care of this. She shook her head. We fight with our hands. Fight to the death. Benny scoffed. Fine with me. He shoved his pistol inside his back pocket and took a fighting stance while Salvatore did the same. No, please, Salvatore. Just go. I can't be with you. Benny's my husband. I'm going back to Melbourne with him. Please leave. No, Marie, enough is enough. Benny threw the first punch, then another and another, until he went down. He gouged one of Salvatore's eyes and flung his head hard against the carpet. Marie moved. No, Benny, stop. I'll come with you. Please stop. Benny softened, giving Salvatore the chance to pound into Benny with a blow to the kidney, and then a swift kick in the leg. Lamps overturned, magazines tumbled in the air, and the coffee table shifted. Benny kicked him on the side of his abdomen, and he keeled over. She had to do something. But what? Benny reached for something in his pants pocket. A flick knife. No. He was going to break the rules. Not on her watch. Salvatore attempted to rise, when Benny stepped forward. A smirk plastered over his face. He wandered over to him when the knife swung in the air. Marie reached for his back pocket, pulled out the gun, and aimed. "Stop, or I'll shoot," he scoffed. "You don't have the guts. Don't even know guns." Benny ignored her, about to stab Salvatore in the throat. Marie pulled the trigger and shot him twice in the stomach. The knife fell, and he dropped like a sack of potatoes. Blood seeped onto the carpet, and she watched and waited for the life force to draw out of him. 3 years of hell. 3 years of watching over her shoulder. 3 years of fearing the lives of her loved ones. Walking quietly on eggshells. Those days were over as the rotten apple drew his last breath. Salvatore shuffled towards her and hugged her. "I love you, Marie. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from him. You've always protected me." She beamed. "I love you too, Salvatore." She savored the gentle caress of her lover's strong arms around her waist. Her eyes shifted, her surroundings vibrating with color. Nor more colorless world. The portrait of silence. Clara was 35 when she inherited the crumbling countryside estate of Château des Ombres, a legacy from a great aunt she barely remembered. The news arrived like an omen, slicing through the fog of her post-heartbreak haze, offering an escape from the echoes of a life she no longer wished to inhabit. The estate was a relic of another time, its walls cloaked in dust and draped with faded, peeling wallpapers. But amid the fading grandeur, one thing stood out. A painting in the dining room, unnervingly lifelike, depicting a woman in 17th century attire. A woman who looked eerily like Clara herself. Dark eyes, too knowing. A face both foreign and familiar. She reached out without thinking, tracing her fingers over the delicate oil strokes. A chill seeped into her skin. She had never been the type to have doppelgangers or be mistaken for someone else. Yet, as she stared at the unsettling realism of the portrait, she wondered, was her face simply ordinary or disturbingly unique? At first, she dismissed the unease. She attributed the odd sensations, the dizziness, the light-headed drift she felt in the dining room, to exhaustion or stress. The house was ancient, creaking with history, and her rational mind clung to explanations. But as weeks passed, the feeling intensified. The air in that room thickened. Her unease grew stronger every time she walked by the portrait. The painting seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. A flicker in the eyes, a whisper of movement in the curls of painted hair. And at night, as she started hearing murmurs in the darkness, indecipherable and persistent, she began to fear that she was truly losing her mind. She sought answers, but the staff who had served her great-aunt Serafina knew little. The painting had always been there, an intrinsic part of the house. Frustrated, Clara turned to Seraphina's belongings, rummaging through drawers and cupboards until she found an old, leather-bound notebook buried in a wooden chest. She flipped through brittle pages filled with lists and recipes until a single entry stopped her cold. She waits in the canvas. She watches. That night, a storm raged. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled through the halls. Sleep was impossible. The words from Seraphina's notebook burned behind her eyes. Before she knew it, she was standing before the painting, breathless, pulse hammering. She reached out, fingers trembling, and scratched at the surface. The paint peeled away in thin layers, revealing another portrait beneath. The same elaborate clothing, the same pose, but the face was different. A stranger's. She could swear the figure in the painting smiled. Briefly, impossibly. The grin was too wide, stretching just beyond the limits of the face. Too sudden, as if it had flickered into existence rather than emerged naturally. A grotesque mimicry of human expression. She blinked rapidly, her breath catching, as though clearing her vision might erase the horror. When she looked again, the smile was gone. A wave of nausea hit her. Staggering back, she felt a weakness grip her limbs. Panic drove her to action. At dawn, she reached out to an art historian she found online. Dr. Theodore Valls arrived at Chateau des Ombres 2 days later. He was a man of careful precision, his salt and pepper hair constantly pushed back, as if keeping stray thoughts in place. His initial response to her frantic message had been one of polite disinterest, until he saw the attached image. He recognized the woman at once. Isabella de Loria. By morning, he was at Chateau des Ombres, his presence sharp against the house's faded grandeur. "This is Alessandro di Rossi's work," he murmured, eyes narrowing in fascination. "An original. But this isn't possible." "What isn't possible?" Clara's voice was taut. He turned to her with a tense expression. Isabella was the only daughter of a powerful aristocratic family from southern Europe. She was painted by nearly all the great artists of her time. She was around 14 when she first posed for a portrait and vanished at age 22. No one knows exactly what happened to her, though there are many tales. But here, he continued, she looks older, much older. Clara led him to the torn fragments of the topmost layer, revealing the face that had been painted over. She looked a lot like me, she whispered, he words feeling absurd even as she begged them. Her voice wavered, caught between disbelief and a creeping certainty she wished she could ignore. Dr. Valls exhaled sharply. The painting was altered, but why? And by whom? As they dug into history, the truth unfurled like a nightmare. The tale of Isabella's disappearance had long been attributed to a commoner's obsession. a man who had watched her from the shadows, consumed by an infatuation that festered into madness. When she refused his advances, he took her. She was hidden away, tortured, broken. Then she vanished. Her body was never found, Dr. Valse said, running a hand through his hair. But if this painting was done later, if Didi Rossi painted her again, aged, changed, then... He hesitated. Then he must have known what became of her, Clara finished. Days of relentless research followed. They sifted through forgotten archives, scoured letters written in fading ink, and pieced together fragments of records long buried in the estate's library. Dr. Valse reached out to colleagues, historians, and experts in restoration. It was in an obscure 17th century art treatise that they found mention of a certain Dai Rossi portrait. One never exhibited, one whispered about in hushed tones, rumored to hold something more than just pigment and canvas. There was never a commoner lurking in the shadows. The story had been a fabrication, a convenient myth. In truth, Dai Rossi had never been commissioned to paint Isabella. He had offered his services for free, captivated by the chance to immortalize such a remarkable face. An unusual gesture for an artist of his stature. His fascination began as artistic admiration, but soon it twisted into something else. He became obsessed, haunted by her beauty, unable to capture it to his satisfaction. When Isabella sat for him, the proximity consumed him. He had to be near her. He had to possess her. She was never seen again. Several years later, Isabella succumbed to the horrors she endured in De Rossi's grip. Unable to let her go, he took her blood and mixed it with his red paint, binding her essence to the canvas. He had painted her into permanence, attempting to capture what was left of her before it faded completely. The painting had fed on those who gazed too long, who felt its pull. A cycle of replacement, over and over. Clara felt the truth settle deep in her bones. Dr. Valse turned to her, something dark flickering in his gaze. We must destroy it. They worked beneath the shroud of midnight, the flickering firelight casting restless shadows against the walls. The painting resisted, its surface trembling, as if something within fought desperately to hold on. Flames licked at the edges, hesitating, as if repelled. Then, with a sudden burst, the fire consumed the canvas, curling the centuries-old paint into ash. A wave of energy rippled through the room, dense, suffocating. And then, a scream, high, raw, inhuman, tore through the air, reverberating through the walls before fading into an eerie silence. Silence. A faint shimmer lingered in the air, barely perceptible, as if resisting the finality of destruction. For a fleeting moment, Clara thought she saw the embers pulse. Not with fire, but with something else she couldn't explain. The house exhaled. The weight pressing against Clara's chest lifted. When the last ember died, only ash remained.
Chad.
Leah and Dave arrived early at Chateau des Ombres, barely containing their excitement at finally purchasing their dream home. By the time the real estate agent arrived and began unlocking the heavy front doors, they had already taken in the surrounding land. Giddy with possibility, they had heard about the disappearance of the previous owner, a woman named Clara. The house had been unoccupied since. Eagerly, they explored the dim hallways, the grand staircase, the candlelit chandeliers. Then, in the dining room, they stopped. There, above the fireplace, hung an old portrait. A woman in 17th century attire, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes were dark and deep, her expression impossibly lifelike. Leah frowned, tilting her head. Something about the portrait unsettled her. Not fear, but familiarity, a strange tug in her gut, a whisper of recognition just beyond reach. That's strange. She looks a bit like... She stopped, heart hammering. How exquisite. The woman in the painting did look a lot like Leah, they both agreed, and for the briefest moment, she swore she saw the lips part, forming a sudden, unnatural smile. Behind them, the door clicked shut. Cornflower blues. It always came at night. That night was no different in that respect. I had heard it lumbering around outside as the sun disappeared from the sky. The sound of scraping metal as it circled the house. I had always fought the urge to look directly at it, instead only catching glimpses of it in the shadows. If I focused, I could shuffle it to the back of my mind, like a deck of cards. But those lonely hours, when night approached and my mind was no longer engaged by work or meaningless check-ins with the few friends I managed to keep, were the hardest. At first, the check-ins came daily, then weekly, then monthly, then whenever they had a free second to pity me via text. Hey girl, you doing okay? Do you need anything? I don't think any of them would have known what to do had I answered yes. I couldn't blame them though. Life goes on. For some people, at least. But anyway, the difference in this particular night was that I had decided to allow my mind to go to that place. No shuffling this time. Instead, accepting the cards that were dealt. Sometime after my 5th or 6th glass of Pinot Noir, I turned my phone off, placed it on the end table next to a stack of unpaid bills, pushed the dirty clothes to one end of the couch, and sank into the other end. Alone. It had been 12 months to the day since I lost my sweet boy with the cornflower blue eyes. Cornflower Connie, as I called him. Parents should never have to bury their children. Todd was completely shattered. He left me this past June. I had dropped to a rail-thin, 99 pounds, and he said he couldn't stand to see me hurt any longer. I tried everything: counseling, group, rehabilitation programs, but everyone grieves differently. I guess Todd had to grieve alone. At some point, I nodded off, waking only to an unsettling silence, quickly realizing the noise was gone. I wiped the drool from my chin, licked my cracked lips, and decided to check it out. With my body bladed to the window, I pulled the curtain to the side and saw it standing under the dim porch light. The back of my neck tingled, and my heart thumped in my chest, acting like my body's panic alarm. I would normally just do a quick look. Instead, for the first time, I stayed. I studied it. Its skin was the color of burnt charcoal, and its back curved like a question mark. It shifted under the light, revealing a Grinch-like face that scrunched even more as it smiled at me, like a mischievous feline. But there, above the unnerving grin, I saw them, those familiar eyes. My cornflower Connie had come home. All I had to do was focus on those eyes. Don't you want to be with me again, Mommy? Let me in, and you can hold me again, just like you used to. What was I supposed to do? Of course, I wanted to be with him again. It would surely be better than telling myself that the random white blob in the sky actually resembled a heart. A message from my Connie. I love you too. Yeah, you can convince yourself of almost anything if you believe it enough, and if you're sad enough, just like the cardinal that occasionally lands on my fence. Good morning, Connie. Thanks for the visit. I let him in. His long, rubbery fingers took me by the arm, led me upstairs, never breaking his gaze. Where are we going? I asked, barely a whisper, in what seemed like the first words I had spoken in days. To my room, Mommy. The door creaked open, and the lights came on, bringing the room back to life. I have no idea if I flipped the switch or not. It felt like I had floated up the staircase. The room was just as he left it. COONRD, colorfully stenciled on the blue wall above his big boy twin bed. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sheets and comforter still ruffled from that night a little over a year ago, when he stumbled into our room just before midnight. Mommy, my chest feels weird, he moaned. After a 104.1 fever, we rushed him to the hospital. My cornflower Connie would never come home again. His fingers rolled up my sleeve and led me to the bed. I pressed his Michelangelo stuffed animal to my face, inhaling deeply, hoping it still held Connie's scent. It didn't. The tears fell, and his grip tightened on my arm, leading me into the bed. He never let go of my arm. Lay with me, Mommy. I climbed in, pulled the covers to my stomach, and rested my head on Connie's pillow. I miss you so much, baby, I yelled through tears, pounding my one free fist on the mattress. I'm here if you keep looking in my eyes. Just then, his eyes flickered, and it, as if I was watching a projection screen. I watched as we took in the afternoon show of the new Spider-Man movie last year. Connie's lap littered with buttery popcorn that missed his mouth, his icy stained lips framing his checkered smile. A flicker, a summer afternoon drive around the neighborhood, blasting random 90s songs. He loved the songs that I grew up on. We would do our absolute worst to sing along. Keep looking at my eyes, Mommy. Just a little bit more until you can hold me again. His grip tightened some more. Another flicker, a lazy Sunday. Me sprawled out on the couch, my Connie's little body slowly rising and falling with my breathing as he naps on my chest. Another second, and I'm yours again. How could I say no? I did what he asked. Just a little longer. The avalanche of warmth I felt was euphoric, as if my insides were swaddled in a heated blanket. It was the first semblance of comfort and peace that I hadn't felt since he was actually here with me. I did what he asked. Then I waited. That was 2 days ago, and I don't see my cornflower Connie anywhere. The comfort I had felt the other day dissipated in an instant. I've been patiently waiting, but now I wonder, did it lie? It's so dark here. The yellow truck. Man, $6 for an ice cream sandwich? Highway robbery. Jack squinted at the menu, slapped crookedly on the side of the bright yellow panel truck. Perry's ice cream. Everyone had a restaurant on wheels these days. Knockoffs of famous characters grinned back at him with their dead eyes. He knew the actual products would be a deformed, melted version of the picture, and he found the irregular eyeballs and melting smiles to be unsettling. A nice, plain ice cream sandwich would hit the spot. Excuse me. Hello. Though the sliding sales window was open, Jack saw no sign of a vendor, even though the speakers puked out a chiptune version of La Cucaracha at top volume. Are you going to take my money or what? The chill from the freezers seeped out from the window. Jack leaned in a little further, noting the container of ice cream sandwiches that could be easily opened from his vantage point. He looked as far into the truck as he could see, then checked over his shoulder to see if he had an audience. The neighbors could be so nosy. With no one in sight, Jack quickly snaked his hand into the window, opened the container, and grabbed hold of a coveted ice cream sandwich. Should have been doing your job, ice cream man, he mumbled as he walked back to his house, mouth full of ice cream and perfectly soggy cookie. He casually tossed the wrapper into his neighbor Mrs. Crowley's yard. Mrs. Crowley was the sort of woman everyone assumed was a witch, and the local kids would egg her house each Halloween and dare each other to ring her doorbell and run. She was probably a very nice lady, but Jack didn't care enough to do anything about it. The yellow truck sat on the street outside Jack's house for hours, rotating through its jaunty but very limited playlist, which, Jack noted, recycled La Cucaracha far more than was probably necessary. Jack considered calling the police, but with his record and at least one warrant out for his arrest, he didn't want to call any attention to himself. Still, he was surprised that no one else in the neighborhood seemed to have called. In fact, no one else in the neighborhood even seemed to pay the truck any mind. The sky eventually darkened, and the street lights buzzed on. And finally, the truck shut off its pixelated musical loop and trundled away. As night settled in, Jack, not wanting to lose the sweet and ill-begotten taste of ice cream from his lips, didn't bother to brush his teeth before crawling into bed. His leg was missing. Jack searched around the house, tossing couch cushions and overturning tables, flinging plates and mugs from his kitchen cabinets, even checking behind the toilet just in case. But no leg. He licked his lips, tasting the smooth vanilla cream from his earlier treat. Jack's brain fought to make a connection between the ice cream sandwich and his missing leg, but the thoughts were foggy and nebulous. The opening notes of La Cucaracha floated into the room. Jack launched upward, sweat pouring from his face as he shook off the nightmare. He tasted the residue of the ice cream on his lips, then flung the clammy sheets off his body to make sure his leg was, in fact, still there. La Cucaracha played in the distance, just audible through his open window. At first, Jack was able to dismiss the music as a memory echo from earlier, but the music grew louder. He lurched out of bed and towards the window, stopping to wrap his robe around himself so the neighbors wouldn't get a peek at his genitals if they happened to be awake, and also looking directly at his house. The familiar yellow panel truck was slowly turning onto his street, music playing at a volume just loud enough for him to hear clearly, but still retain a dreamlike quality. Jack had the strangest feeling. The headlights were aimed directly at him as the truck crept towards his house, an inching pace that was almost sinister. It was far too dark to see if a driver was present this time, but Jack assumed there was one. Jack shut the window, muting the noise just a touch, and tried to get back to sleep. The song slithered into his ears and brain, worming around and preventing him from falling back to sleep. He promised himself that he would give the driver a stern talking to in the morning if the truck were still parked outside his house. As the sun started to peak over the horizon, the music finally died down, and Jack stood in the window, watching the panel truck slowly crawl down the street. He hadn't bothered to grab his robe this time, but the fog of sleeplessness had settled over his brain. More than 1 cup of bitter, black coffee was necessary to get him ready for the ride to work. Slower reactions would make the commute more dangerous, he thought, snapping on his bike helmet. He cursed his revoked driver's license, unsteadily mounted the bike, and started pedaling. At each red light, Jack took a generous swig out of his travel mug, and by the time he sat down at his desk, he was wired. The sheer amount of coffee he drank that morning had agitated Jack's stomach, so he was looking forward to having solid food by the time noon rolled around. A little something to absorb all that coffee. He walked to his favorite sandwich shop, a tiny hole in the wall, a block or so down from his office. It was a checkered tablecloth affair, plus an easily accessible tip jar and an oblivious cashier, so he almost always broke even. The welcome bell chimed merrily as Jack opened the door, but the chimes didn't stop when the door closed. He paused, listening, then realized the notes formed a song. La cucaracha increased in volume, steadily, and Jack was too busy frowning at the noise to notice when the hostess greeted him. Sorry. Table for one, he told her, and she walked him to a booth by the window. Jack started to sit, but realized he could see the bright yellow panel truck pull awkwardly into the parallel parking spot directly in front of the diner. He sprang back, an odd fear clawing at his chest. Maybe a different table, he said. The hostess shrugged and pointed him to a table near the kitchen. Jack slumped down in a chair that still let him see out the window. The menu, still as maddeningly crooked as before, was fully visible from this vantage point. And Jack noted that though the sales window was open, no one was manning the counter. So Jack couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as he ordered his lunch, chewed, drank, wiped his mouth with his flimsy paper napkin, paid at the counter, helped himself to the tip jar, and walked out the door. Every move soundtracked by the tinny tunes pumping out of the truck's speaker. No one had approached the counter to buy an ice cream the entire lunch hour. His muscles relaxed as he walked back to his building. The more the music faded with distance, the better he felt. He hadn't even noticed he was so tense. Jack rolled his neck around, rotated his shoulders, and was just about to reach the automatic doors to his office when he heard it again. The 8-bit notes of La Cucaracha increased in volume behind him, and he swung around, fists raised and heart beating rapidly. His boss, who had been walking up immediately behind him, backed up. "Whoa! Whoa! Jack!" Treating Jack like a panicked horse had, presumably, his boss's desired effect. And Jack put his fists down. "What's got you all spooked? Bad sandwich?" His boss chuckled, and then breezed past Jack into the office. Still on the sidewalk, Jack caught a flash of yellow down the block. He didn't wait to see the truck this time, and rushed inside. Jack was waiting, rather impatiently, to cross the street on his way home when a shiver ran up his spine. He looked over his shoulder and his stomach seized. The yellow ice cream truck was also in line at the stoplight, just 3 car lengths away. It wasn't playing the music, but Jack thought he could hear it all the same. Jack wasn't completely sure that the truck was following him, specifically as he cycled through the neighborhood. But with each turn, he became more and more convinced. The truck kept a slow speed and stayed a modest distance behind his bike, far lower than the posted speed limit. He stopped at the cluster mailbox at the top of his street, mostly to check the mail, but also to see if the ice cream truck would keep driving. The truck slowed to a halt a few yards from the mailboxes, the staccato sounds still aggressively worming its way into Jack's brain. Jack fiddled with the mailbox key and took an unnecessary amount of time inspecting each piece of mail, even the junk. But the ice cream truck still didn't move, and Jack stared directly at the driver's side of the windshield. It was so tinted that he was still unable to tell if anyone was in the driver's seat at all. He flipped the bird, just in case, and got back on his bike. As he started pedaling the short distance to his house, the truck started following again, a few houses down from his own. Jack heard the truck accelerate. His heart thumping, he quickly looked back to confirm that, yes, the ice cream truck was speeding up and heading his way. He checked his surroundings for a safe place to duck behind, but only Mrs. Crowley's rose bushes offered any sort of protection. He darted towards the bushes, abandoning his bike and hurling himself into the roses in one semi-graceful movement that would have made a movie stuntman proud. The thorns bit into his skin, and one scratched dangerously close to his left eye. The truck had missed him, but Jack heard the screech of brakes. Jack painfully extricated himself from the rose bushes, and the ice cream truck still idled in the road. La cucaracha, blaring incessantly. The back door of the truck swung open with a creak. "Hey!" Jack yelled, wiping blood from his face, only to realize he also had blood on his hands and lots of other places because of the thorns. He lurched towards the back of the truck, his left leg dragging slightly. It would be bruised in the morning, he thought. "Hey, I'm talking to you, asshole!" Jack rounded the back of the truck and leaned on the open door. No one was inside. Through a narrow break in the curtains, Mrs. Crowley observed Jack as he yelled at the ice cream truck. He had always been an odd duck, that Jack. Terribly messy. And just the other day, he had been standing at his window in the middle of the night with only a robe on. She had almost seen his genitals. Mrs. Crowley couldn't make out exactly what Jack was yelling, but she imagined it was full of swearing. He started to lean into the open back of the truck, and then, in an instant, he was yanked inside. Before his legs made it all the way across the bumper, the doors of the truck slammed shut with such force that Jack's left leg was severed at the knee. The bloody leftovers dropped unceremoniously to the pavement and rolled to the curb, high-pitched notes of La Cucaracha distorted with static, and the truck shuddered violently. Mrs. Crowley took a tiny sip of her tea and watched the menu sign spin as the truck convulsed. With one last tremble, the truck stilled and the spinning sign stopped. The music had changed, and so had the sign's content. Perry's Hamburgers, it read. Still crooked, the truck slowly crept down the street, and she pinched her curtains shut. The mysterious painting, after pushing back from its gate, the Swiss Air midday flight to New York moved slowly through a light snow flurry to its designated runway. The first-class cabin was less than half full. The passenger in 1A was pleased there was no one opposite. A smiling cabin crew offered him a glass of champagne. He declined, asking for double single malt. He thought about the voicemail, a somewhat guarded call, coming from someone he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. What drove his final response was the email attachment that followed. He'd tried retuning the call, but it went to voicemail. He sensed something was wrong. He'd barely had time to return to his apartment from where he'd been staying, find his passport, pack a new bag, and take his car service to the airport. Something was telling him missing the flight was not an option. Philippe Abano was an internationally recognized art specialist, having spent 35 years researching the French Impressionists, a group of artists whose collective works, long after their passing, at auction, would shake the art world to its foundations. As with many famous artists, there were finished canvases, although documented, which had never been located. The Nazi art plunder, which began in Germany in 1933, contributed to the loss of artworks across Europe. The French Impressionists were not exempt from this pillage. 48 hours previous, Marie Le Pen was an art restorer. She worked almost exclusively for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, specializing in the restoration of damaged watercolors. On occasion, she did private restoration with the museum's knowledge. She'd taken a call from a person representing a Mr. Restless, saying she'd been recommended by her superior at the museum as someone to inspect a damaged watercolor he possessed. Marie, who loved her work, agreed to view the painting. She agreed a time the following day. Mr. Retzlaff would send a car. Very swish, she thought. After offloading her bags from the limousine sent for her, she looked around. The street was amazing. Narrow with private residences, no commercial properties. The houses all appeared to be of similar build, 5 or 6 floors above ground, with basements or walk-downs. Every property was maintained like new. Flowers and trees adorned the street. There was no garbage and no graffiti. The residence they stopped in front of was impressive, with red brick and huge floor-to-ceiling windows, edged with carved stone. At roof level, gargoyles peered down, surveying the scene. This was a part of New York most people would never see. Amazing. She followed the driver up the marble steps. He pulled on the brass handle and returned to the car. A man wearing a bow tie and black trousers answered. "Yes, madam?" he inquired. "I'm Marie Le Pen. I believe you're expecting me?" She smiled. "We are indeed, madam," the stern-faced man replied. The entrance hall was huge. She could smell timber and brass polish. The black and white checkered tiled floor was straight out of an English TV series. The doors leading off the foyer were all closed. A majestic, sweeping staircase held sway over the entrance. Huge brass vases, once filled with flowers, stood empty either side of the entrance. Apart from the electric light, the only modern consideration was a mechanical elevator. "Please," the man gestured, "follow me." They entered the elevator, along with her baggage. Marie watched as the man pressed 5. The door closed, and they began their ascent. On the 5th floor was another vestibule. This one had more polished timber and huge windows onto the street below. "This way." He gestured, then walked along a long corridor before he opened a large double door into what looked like a series of smaller spaces. If Marie hadn't had complete faith in her boss, she'd have been scared. At one side of the room, a man sat, straight-backed, with silver-gray hair. She guessed at least late 80s, wearing a green corduroy smoking jacket. He stood. She could smell cigar smoke. "Thank you for coming. I'm Peter Retzlaff. Fact is, Miss Le Pen, I need an expert opinion as to a certain painting that is in my possession. Should I, or should I not, restore it? Your superior at the Met spoke most highly of you." Marie saw several large art tables, specialist seats, and an array of instruments, all designed specifically for art restoration. She was gobsmacked. There had to be $1 million in equipment and instruments, brand new, some still in their original packaging, just sitting there. The old man waved his hand, and the valet unlocked a large steel cabinet with racks of what looked to Maria like canvases, painted canvases in various stages of decomposition. Strange, she thought. He slid one of the racks out and removed a painting, a watercolor that Maria recognized. After putting on her smock and gloves, examined the item more closely. Behind her, a phone rang. The valet took a cell phone from his pocket and listened, then said something softly to the old man. They steeped away to the side of the room, out of earshot. Maria continued looking at the canvas, heavily water-damaged with a once grand frame that also appeared flawed. She was about to make some preliminary notes into her phone. As she moved around the table, a splash of red caught her eye. The steel cabinet, which held the damaged painting, was open on one side. What she saw made her heart stand still. It was a large canvas of what appeared to be small wooden bridge over water in a garden. Although no expert, she'd seen enough examples of French impressionistic work to know this could be one. Marie quickly turned her phone to camera, taking 2 quick shots, only to be interrupted by raised voices. The old man was saying something to the valet in what sounded like German, who dashed past her, securing the door to the cabinet. Ending her view, she said nothing, returning to the recorder in her phone, her head down, trying to appear as though she was concentrating. The old man looked suspiciously at her, said nothing. She could feel his eyes. "My God, what have you just seen?" she asked herself. Maria spent the next 2 hours making notes and photographing the damage. She agreed to return the following day with her recommendations and estimates, should she consider it restorable. Restless agreed, giving her a copy of a providence document relating to the painting, which she would need to study. He told her he would send a car for her at an agreed time. She shook his hand and returned to the waiting limousine. The previous 2 hours did not sit well with her. Quite why, she couldn't say. The images of the red canvas wouldn't leave her. The storm had hit with a vengeance. Sudden spring rain washing the roadways, reminding New Yorkers summer was not far away. The crowded eateries on the streets of the East Village were suddenly deserted, sending outside diners scrambling for shelter inside. From her small single-bed apartment off McDougal Street, above a drugstore, Maria sat looking at the 2 images she downloaded from her camera. The room was quiet, save for the rhythm of the rain tapping at her window. On the larger screen, she could see more clearly the image she'd snapped earlier. The images were very much French impressionistic, of the late 19th or early 20th century. She could see the attempt to produce work inspired by real life. It was revolutionary. French impressionist artists rejected classical subject matter in favor of modernity, seeking to produce works that represented their current circumstances and environments. The more she looked, the more she was convinced. It was what she suspected. "My God," she exclaimed. "Could it be a Monet, hidden in a steel cabinet in a residence on the Upper West Side?" It would explain the old man's annoyance at the cabinet being left open, particularly in the presence of a third party who just happened to be an art restoration expert. Maria took stock, pouring another glass of wine, wondering what she should do next. She thought about the man who had mentored her 15 years ago at Switzerland's largest art museum, the Kunsthaus Zurich, Philippe Abano. If anyone could make sense on what she had seen, he could. She'd not had any contact with Philippe for over a decade. Now he worked in a private capacity, advising galleries and writing books on the subject of French art, in particular, French Impressionism. His web page provided email and phone contact details. Maria thought carefully as how she should frame the call Without identifying the object, before she made the call, she uploaded the 2 photographs into a separate folder, attaching it to the email address she had for Felipe Abano. Suspecting the call would go to voicemail, she'd prepared a statement. At 10:30 p.m., she made the call, voicemail. She introduced herself, telling him of her current position at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, reminding him of their previous association, how she'd come to see what she'd seen, making no reference to a place or names, asking him for his opinion as to the images attached to the following email. Finishing the call, she pressed the send button. In the street below, a man sat in a black limousine, its wipers on intermittent sweeps, clearing the spitting rain, watching the illuminated small window above the drugstore. The Swiss Air flight gathered speed as it approached its takeoff point at Zurich Airport. Food and service trolleys rattled in their compartments as the aircraft's nose finally lifted into a gray, overcast day, the engines screaming. Philippe Abano was anxious and at the same time nervous, processing what he'd heard and seen in the previous few hours from one Maria Le Pen. Once the pilot had removed the seatbelt sign, he reached for his laptop. Putting on his glasses, began his search. East Village, New York City. Detectives Allison Maroney and her partner, Alex Sonny, stood at the open door of 1A, the apartment above the drugstore in the East Village. They flashed their shields at the uniform on the door. "What we got?" Allison inquired. The uniformed officers' badges read Lomax. "So, Officer Lomax, talk to us." The officer opened his notebook. "A deceased female found dead after we gained entry, possible gunshot. A Miss Holland." He gestured upwards. In 2A, reported a cat calling and scratching at the deceased's door. Apparently, the tenant regularly let her cat out when she came home from work, and then opened up when Pussy wanted in. Except, this time, no response. Cat keeps calling. She, Miss Holland, knocked. Nothing. As she heard the tenant arrive earlier that evening, she was reluctant to use the spare key she had, deciding to call 911 instead. We attended. The cat was still scratching at the door. Miss Holland gave us the key and witnessed a non-forced entry. We discovered the body and called the station, securing the scene. The ME, who arrived shortly after we called it in, puts time of death at around 8 p.m., give or take. Pulling on latex gloves, Detective Maroney knelt next to the body. ID? Yes. A wallet with cash and cards. A Maria Le Pen, 37, works at the Metropolitan Museum as an art restorer. ID shows her address as here. No driver's license. Detective Sonny moved carefully around the small room. Laptop? Cell? Neither, though I'm guessing she had both. They're chargers for each in here and in the bedroom. To recap, Sunny offers. No phone, no laptop, nothing taken except said cell and computer. Not a robbery then, and no sign of a forced entry. Sunny looked at his partner skeptically, shrugging his huge shoulders. Single gunshot between the eyes, small caliber, maybe .22. Very professional. This look like a hit to me, Maroney offered. What do you think? After 3 hours of intense in-flight investigation, Philippe Abano concluded it was a work by Claude Monet, albeit a later work. His once subtle transitions between shades became bolder and less precise, reflecting the challenges posed by his deteriorating eyesight. Monet's health struggles extended beyond his eyes, but his vision loss had the most direct impact on his art. And it was this Philippe Abano recognized. He'd even found a reference to a non-catalogued work titled Pont sur l'eau bleue, Bridge over Blue Water. It was listed as one of several, being prepared by Monet's agent for exhibit in Paris. The exhibition never eventuated, the listed paintings unaccounted for. This was no great mystery for Armand. A number of explanations could be found. The artist withdrew the works, no reason given. An issue with the gallery, or sold before exhibition. The latter Armand found more convincing. It would also explain its anonymity for over a century, a private or family collection that may have suffered at the hands of the Nazi art plunder of the 30s. The whereabouts of many were still unknown. Either way, a mystery that may well be explained when he was to meet with Maria Le Pen in 4 hours' time. Monochromatic. This story includes depictions of mental health and death. There is nothing graphic, but these topics are touched on. I had never been quite fond of Eve. As her psychiatric nurse, the buoy who kept her from drowning in an ocean of madness, I should have made an effort to respect my patient. I should have, and yet I couldn't. It was unbearable to deal with a soul so far gone, someone so dreadfully insane. Nonetheless, Evelyn Barrett was still mine to care for, my own burden. It was odd to dwell on the fact that someone so young, barely even 18 to be exact, could mentally fall down such a slippery slope. Eve was admitted to the sanitarium around 2 months ago, following her breakdown at school. According to her classmates, Eve had never been social. She tended to keep to herself when given the choice. And while this was not abnormal behavior for a teenage girl, it had always been different with Eve. Well, it had grown to become different. Students began reporting incidents involving Eve. They would hear her muttering to herself in class, her words unintelligible, but her whispers crazed. They would hear her sobbing in bathroom stalls. Her teachers noticed her grades slipping. Eve would write ominous messages on her papers, and she would draw horrific drawings in her notebook. Drawings of characters plucked straight from horror movies, monsters. Though her behavior was abnormal, Eve caused no problems. She remained silent, which was nothing out of the ordinary. She basked in the endless insanity of her paranoid, twisted mind. But at that time, no one was aware of how truly twisted it was. After months of containment, Eve suddenly exploded. She jumped up in the middle of class and shrieked, screaming bloody murder. Accounts of the story from her classmates explained that Eve screamed, "Leave me alone," dozens of times. According to the witnesses, Eve was not talking to a specific person, not one that anyone could see anyway. Her teachers restrained her and subdued her screams. Her behavior was, according to her classmates, purely and utterly horrifying, insane. And so, I was stuck with Evelyn Barrett. I tried to build connections with my patients, and usually, I was successful. Over my years as a nurse, I liked to think that my psychological support helped my patients heal. It did. There was no doubt about it. I did my job well, until Eve came along. For some odd reason, I could not break through with Eve, break into her subconscious and heal her fragile mind. Whenever I tried to talk to her, she would do one of two things. Either she would completely block me out, or she would scream nonsense at me. In any case, neither method was beneficial in the slightest. The past 2 months had consisted of pointless therapy sessions and no progress whatsoever. I couldn't help but feel sorry for the poor girl. As I walked into my tidy office, I pushed out a sigh and slumped into my armchair. Eve was scheduled to meet with me at any second, and to be quite honest, I was dreading our session. Up until now, my day had been calm. My serenity was about to be interrupted simply by being in the presence of the crazed child. 3 knocks on the door was all it took. My spine straightened, and I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. My automatic physical response whenever Eve was near. The creaking of the door disturbed my therapeutic silence, and as I watched a caretaker escort Eve through the doorway, a queasy feeling began to form in my gut. Eve seemed on edge today, more on edge than normal. Her long cascade of honey blonde hair was ruffled, as though she couldn't be bothered to run a comb through it. Her face was a sickly shade of white. The shadows casted upon her face complemented the lack of life within her frozen, gray eyes. Eyes that hardly looked like eyes at all. She looked dreadful. The caretaker made sure that Eve settled comfortably on the couch before taking her leave. Nevertheless, Eve looked nothing but uncomfortable. She brought her knees to her chest and hugged them tightly, her body resembling something of a ball. Her hands shook while her feet tapped on the cushion over and over again. It was easy to assume that nerves had Eve in a chokehold. "How are you doing today, Eve?" I asked the girl, my voice visibly annoyed. I didn't care enough to put on a facade for her. Eve wasn't fond of me, as far as I could tell. It was obvious by the way her eyes ever so slightly cut into my face, as though they were two honed knives. Regardless, the feeling was mutual, and so treating one another this way had become routine. Usually when I asked her a question, Eve ignored it completely. I assumed she would simply ignore me by the way her gaze dug into my skin, and so I wasted no time before pulling out my notebook. Lazily, I jotted down a note. "Silence," I wrote. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I heard a raspy breath emerge from her mouth. "He's going to kill me soon," Eve muttered, her voice barely a whisper. I could hardly comprehend her words. Her empty eyes widened as her fingernails dug into her pants. The girl rocked back and forth in a crazed manner, almost as though she truly feared for her life. I, for one, believed that Eve was bananas, but as her nurse, I could not disregard such an alarming phrase. "Who? Who's going to kill you?" I asked, as calmly as possible. Though I knew that Eve was completely mad, I knew that she was. Her words still managed to send a chill through my bones. Eve disregarded my words for a moment, her mind unable to flee from whatever eternal nightmare it was trapped in. Her gaze remained on the ground and focused on anything but me. Seconds ticked by. Minutes. Finally, Eve's eyes snapped to mine, somehow more frantic than before. "He's taking over my life, the world around me, everything," she snapped loudly, her sharp words making me flinch. Her body recoiled after her outburst, and she scrunched back into her ball with a shaken expression on her face. "He's going to kill me soon," she repeated. "I just know it." With a sigh, I set my notebook aside and leaned forward. This wasn't the first time that Eve had acted up during a session, but this was the first time that she seemed so sure. So sure about the fact that something was bothering her. I said, "You are safe here, Eve. Nothing is going to kill you. This is all in your mind, okay? You're okay." "No, please, Debbie. I am not insane. This is real," Eve persisted. Hearing her say my name was odd. She had never addressed me before, and until now, I did not know that she even knew my name. He's out to get me. The Shadow Man. He's the Shadow Man?" I repeated incredulously. Despite Eve's urgency, I did not believe her words. Her crazed, perplexing words. She had never once opened up to me like this, and so I had no reason to believe that she was telling the truth now. Instead of dismissing her comment, I wanted to dig further. It was my job, after all. "Who is he?" Eve shuddered, as though a gust of icy wind had blown through the room. "I don't know." She paused abruptly and locked eyes with me. "But he takes things from me. He steals them, despite my confusion. I played into her claim. What does he take from you? Eve blinked multiple times. Color. Color? The color that I see. The color that she sees. What does that mean, Eve? I asked, and anxiety grasped my brain. Her answer, while strange, was also oddly specific. And something about that was off-putting. Color blindness. Was that what Eve was hinting at? Were colors fading from her vision? I took my assumption and rolled with it. Does your family have a history of color blindness? That sounded about right. Perhaps Eve was losing her sense of color, and she was freaking out about it. That wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary, but it was obviously nothing to go crazy about. No, it's not color blindness. He takes the color from me. She snapped again, her expression flushing with maroon fury. You're wrong. I am not crazy. You think I am, but I'm not. I'm not. Suddenly, Eve was on her feet, marching across the room to my desk. I sat up out of habit and hesitated. Eve seemed angry. Was she going to attack me? Grab for a weapon? I decided to take no chances, and I, too, rose to my feet. I turned to face Eve, only to find that she was inspecting various objects on my desk. Colored pens, Post-its, my computer. It's all black and white. Everything. She picked up a lime green Post-it and shook it in her hand. I can't tell what color this is. He stole it from me. It's gone. It's all gone. He's gonna kill me once everything is gone. Eve, calm down. No, I can't. Eve paused abruptly when her eyes fell upon a particular object on my desk. Her mouth gaped open as she snatched the object, inspecting it in awe. I almost reached for her arm and demanded for her to put the object down, but I restrained myself. Eve held the card that my daughter had made for me years ago. On the front of the card was a drawing of a rainbow, colored messily with crayon. My daughter had handcrafted the card when I fell terribly ill, and I believe that the card itself had cured me. I had kept it lying on my desk all these years, and the messy rainbow had been my constant reminder that color can supply us with life and wellness. And now, as Eve's shaky hands grasped the card, I fought the urge to snatch it from her. This card was precious to me. I couldn't risk her ruining it. It's colorful. She gasped in awe, her eyes absorbing the card as though its sparkles were emitting from it. I can see the rainbow. He hasn't stolen it from me. Suddenly, Eve's guard was up once again, and she clenched the card against her chest. I winced as the paper grew crinkled in her strong grasp. I need to keep this card with me. I can't let the Shadow Man steal it. It's all I have left. Protectively, I shook my head. My deranged patient could not be trusted with my precious card. my personal gift from my daughter. No, I don't think that's... Debbie, please, Eve urged. For one moment, the desperation in her voice made her sound sane. This is life or death. I am not insane. He is going to kill me. I can't let him steal the color from this. It's all I have. Please. Hesitance gripped me by the throat, and I opened my mouth to speak. Nothing came out. Eve stared me down, and her empty eyes were suddenly not empty anymore. They weren't lifeless. Instead, they seemed brighter, filled with life, with hope. I had never seen this side of Evelyn Barrett before. I stuttered. Nothing is going to happen to you, Eve. You don't need this card. But as I said these words, even I heard the doubt within my voice. I felt that I would regret keeping the card. Perhaps if I gave Eve the card to borrow, she would feel more at ease. Perhaps this card was the key to break through into Eve's mind. Perhaps she wasn't so far gone. Reluctantly, I backed away from the girl. Just keep it for now. That's fine, I sighed. Eve's eyes sparkled, and a hint of a smile pricked at her lips. She looked normal, as though she didn't live in a sanitarium. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, thank you, she repeated hastily. Just return it to me when you no longer need it. Of course. Eve's mannerism was completely different than it had been when she first arrived. As she continued inspecting the card in awe, I couldn't help but smile. Perhaps I could help her. Perhaps the Eve that I was not quite fond of was fading, and a new girl was coming to light. Either way, I felt the start of something new. Hope. The next day, I was scheduled to check up on Eve. The feeling of apprehension that usually sat in the pit of my stomach was gone. Ever since our session yesterday, I had faith that my patient was healing, truly healing. I walked with optimism, hopeful that my relationship with Eve was growing stronger. One of the best feelings as a therapist was knowing that you were of aid to your patient, that you were able to dig them out of a great hole. It felt rewarding, fulfilling. I approached Eve's door and knocked gently so as not to startle her. Though she was in the process of healing, she was still fragile. I waited for a few seconds before knocking again. Eve did not respond, and I heard no noise from inside the room. The queasy feeling in my stomach returned. I knocked louder. No response. To accompany my uneasiness, an alarm resonated through my skull. Something was wrong. Skeptically, I pushed open the door and took a quick glance around the room. It didn't take long for me to spot her. Eve. She was sprawled out on the ground, unconscious. Without hesitation, I crouched on the floor next to her, shaking her shoulder. Eve? Eve? I blurted. There was no response. She didn't move. No, Eve. Wake up. My chest felt light, as I reached for Eve's delicate wrist. There was no pulse. In fact, her skin was a block of ice. "Oh my God, Eve." Numbly, my eyes trailed over towards her hand. Her fingers limply held a little slip of paper with a rainbow on it. The card that my daughter made. The next few moments were a blur. My body began moving on its own, while my mind remained stuck on the image of Eve's body on the floor. Her still, pale body, as I unconsciously grabbed the card out of Eve's limp hand and shoved it in my pocket. I heard muffled voices entering the bedroom, scrambling around me, asking me what had happened. I didn't process the question, couldn't process it. All of my senses were honed in on Eve, on the fact that she was dead. Nurses surrounded Eve and I, and before I knew it, I was laying on the ground too, losing consciousness. I felt as though I was floating in outer space, and it became a struggle to breathe. My vision was fading into a deep darkness, and everyone near me was fading. The nurses, Eve, everything was fading. I was grasping onto nothing. But no, something was still there, hidden in the corner of my periphery. Though it blended within the darkness overtaking my mind, it wasn't completely hidden. I saw it. Him, though hardly visible, I was still able to make out the silhouette of a large man standing in the corner of the room. He hardly looked like a man at all, really. As far as I could tell, he had no hair, no face. He looked like an apparition by the way he blended into the wall behind him. He was the absence of everything, a void where light should have been. It was impossible to make out the distinct features of the man, but even with a blurry glimpse, I knew that the man was something of a sinister entity. Evil. As I blacked out, two words repeatedly rang in my head. They reverberated deeply, their consonants sounding of menacing death knells. It was all I heard as I lost consciousness. Shadow man, shadow man, shadow man. I woke up with a start on the couch in my office. My thoughts immediately trailed to what I last could remember. They trailed to Eve. She had died. Was that all a dream? What if it wasn't? What was the cause of her death? She was healthy, physically at least. Nothing made sense. The shadowed silhouette grazed my thoughts, and a chill fell over my body. I must have been imagining the man. I had not been in the right state of mind, nearly on the brink of passing out. It was an illusion. It had to be. So why was it that Eve had also been hallucinating a shadow man? A lump in my pocket alerted my senses, and I reached for whatever was inside. My fingers lifted out a piece of crinkled paper, scrunched up in a ball. The card. It was ruined, shoved in my pocket like a piece of trash as my eyes welled up with tears. I unfolded the paper and examined the rainbow on the front. I blinked multiple times and wiped away the tears from my eyes. Something wasn't right. My vision was playing games with me as I stared at the card, at the sloppy rainbow on the front. My heart dropped as I realized something. Eve wasn't crazy. The rainbow on the front of the card was no longer drawn in colorful crayon. It was purely black and white, those eyes of mine. The machine beeped, boiled and seethed. I pressed the button, and water leaked, filling the cup to its brim. A cup of coffee, pure. I opened the window wide, letting the breeze tingle the fuzz on my nape. Sat beneath it, picked up the cigarette from the ashtray that had burned lonely for so long that the ash stretched from its tip almost to the cotton, forming a bridge undisturbed by its weight. I shook it off and pulled on it. The taste of burned butt dominated the tobacco tang. The coffee cleansed it. Drops from the drizzle intruded on my domicile, enhancing the soothing effect of the wind on the dots they marred. The sun had tucked tail and crept behind clouds. Rest, the doctor had prescribed. Nerves, stretched thin, throbbed in harmony with the rain. Oh, the rain. How could I, Doc? The weather called my name. I donned my shoes and jacket, closed the door, strode down the stairs to the streets. The slabs of cement towered over, reaching for the skies. The drops welcomed me, painting me gently. A ball snuck in, got trapped between my eyes and glasses, while the rest rained down like arrows on a battlefield. People buzzed up and around, busy little bees. Yet, however or whomever I tried to peek at, all that I managed to see was but a blur, mangled by the shower, by the rain, by its tears. They paved a path for themselves, dug ruts on my glasses. My vision failed to pierce. I trailed what I assumed to be their tracks. When one's feet made space for themselves on the puddles as they stepped, and left it vacant when they departed, that's when the ensuing spot got filled with water. It created a momentary footstep. That's what I followed. A fleeting moment along the restless ponds, vibrating in seclusion from one another. The vista of concrete proved inescapable. For the moment, the puddles were left undisturbed. That's what they showed. A reflection of gray, hubs of broken dreams. The vehicles behaved strangely under the rain. They too beeped, stalled, and buzzed around. The path led me along the blocks, passing from one street to the other. The vistas remained the same. Were they copies of one another? Or was I stuck in place? I lifted my head and flicked the flock of drops off my locks. That was the third bus stop that I approached. The carrier reloaded, its travelers hurrying outside with new ones coming on board. To avoid the crowd, I lingered in my gait, pulled out my pack and plucked a treat. The way it nested on my lips brought a moment of respite. The lighter struggled, producing sparks, again and again. Yet no flame. The rain dampened both. The bus drove off. I continued my journey with no obstacles in sight, threading the many tracks left behind. Need a light? A question asked from beneath the canopy of the stop. The mess on my glasses had turned to a layer. A coat of mist. A mush of hair, clothes, legs, and arms. And a lighter, lit with a gray-washed flame. I crouched, touched the light, and tasted the smoke. Pulled my head back into the rain. What? You'll just leave? The tender voice continued, anchoring me on the dock. I pondered. Was one cigarette enough? No. I towed 2 butts out of their home and returned the gesture. My glasses slid as I crouched, parked on the peaking bone of my nose. The clouds had slid too, allowing the sun to shoot its beams on the glass walls of the bus stop. Their pallid reflection blinded me, but I felt the pack lighten. The person lagged, suggesting hesitation. Disturbed by the sudden change in the weather, I looked back at the sun, but it was no more. Thicker clouds had settled in. The rain was picking up heat. Don't miss the next one. If you wish to avoid the deluge, that is, I said, stowing the pack into my pocket. The hymning tone concealed a plea behind my ear, maybe one of attention or of interaction. Entertaining these ideas had brought me here, so I failed to see a reason for another attempt. My surroundings grew tired, a waterlogged world crying in its stead. Steps continued. The rain poured. The worse it got, the fewer people brooded. How did I end up here, I wondered, amid this city, amid the crosses of colorless walls, and amid the faceless people? How far had I wandered? How long it had been? I swerved on the road, heading towards the park. An island with different scenery. Or so I thought. The rain had dug its claws here too, washing away all that would help me recall what was. Think of what could have been. Instead, I was forced to watch what is in another gray landscape. The sky's tears battled with the leaves. The branches swung at one another. Fierce battles ensued. The road continued straight up to a fountain, where it diverged and transformed into a circle, and restoring itself back into a straight line, it continued. I sat near the formation, for the trees obeyed the road, and the sky, with its gray clouds, remained visible, and the battles fought turned into echoes from afar. The rain poured, thickening the layering clog on my glasses, changing it with another, never letting them rest. Down it poured. My cigarette had long been extinguished, yet the respite it brought remained all the same. And so, I kept sucking on the wet cotton. Lost, I dabbled with questions, I knew I shouldn't ask. A man's worst enemy was his own mind. I had hoped for the rain to wash away the colors of my brain too. But they remained, blinking ever so often, showing me what was. My clothes heavy, burdened with the rain, pulled me down on the bench. My hair, too, wet, as if splashed on my scalp. I bit the butt with my teeth and looked above, to the soaring skies. My eyes were protected, so I didn't flinch. Instead, I enjoyed the moment of rain, enjoyed the moment of solitude, the moment of respite. The rivers ran, the fountain spat, and the clouds rumbled. I remained. For how long could I remain? For how long would I? My legs pulled in pain, and noise had settled at the bottom of my feet, a numbing pump. My head ached. I pulled on my dimmed cigarette. In this park, I had hoped to encounter a spark of life. The leaves were falling, the branches were breaking from the wind, and my ankles drowned beneath the rivers. The pouring rain consumed. Hungry, it ate everything. But the pain, my teeth failed to cling on. My mouth gapped. I dropped my companion. It soaked, increased in weight, and sank. What was another lost cigarette in the rinsing sea? So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.